99%. That's how much of modern yoga has nothing to do with the actual yoga tradition. If you've practiced yoga for years and felt that something was missing, this video might tell you what it was. Let me describe the yoga most people know. You walk into a studio, there's a teacher in the front, there's a sequence of poses, your breath is mentioned quite often. There might be a little Dharma talk at the end, or some Om chanting before the class. The poses might have Sanskrit names. The teacher will tell you the practice is 5,000 years old, came from sages in the Himalayas, that this is the real ancient thing. That story is mostly invented. Not by your teacher, by the system your teacher trained in. And the system itself is much younger than it claims to be. I'll give you one example. The most iconic sequence in modern yoga, sun salutation, Surya Namaskar. Most people will tell you that it's ancient. And actually many parts of it are ancient. But the Surya Namaskar you know was invented in 1928 by Bhavanrao Pant Pratinidhi, the Maharaja of Aurith. He was a strong man into traditional Indian wrestling, and he wanted a fitness regimen for soldiers and school children. He took elements from wrestling exercises, Indian gymnastics, and a few yoga postures and assembled them into a flowing sequence. He published a book about it in 1928 called Surya Namaskar. A few decades later, a yoga teacher named Krishnamacharya, and we'll come back to him, absorbed this into what he was teaching at the Mysore Palace. It's a fitness sequence from a Maharaja's palace, less than 100 years old. Almost everyone who teaches this thinks it's ancient. That's the structure of modern yoga, and once you see it in one place, you start seeing it everywhere. So when did this break happen? The line is somewhere between 1800 and 1850. The yoga we know today is a modern invention, built in dialogue with British colonialism, Indian nationalism, early Western psychology, and also Victorian fitness culture. The pivotal moment most historians point to is 1893, when Swami Vivekananda speaks at the World Parliament of Religions in Chicago. He is an unknown Indian monk. He talks about non-dualism, Vedanta, not really yoga as we know it today, and he changes the conversation. People love what he's saying, and then he goes back to India and starts a movement. But the real architect of what most people now call yoga is one man, Tirumalai Krishnamacharya, born in 1888. His students were Pattabhi Jois, who created Ashtanga Yoga, B.K.S. Iyengar, who created Iyengar Yoga, Indra Devi, who brought yoga to Hollywood and to Soviet Russia, T.K.V. Desikachar, who developed Vini Yoga. If you are doing modern postural yoga, your line most likely goes back to Krishnamacharya. And here's what my teacher said about Krishnamacharya, and what every careful yoga historian I've read confirms from outside the lineage. Krishnamacharya is a remarkable figure. He's also a model example of what happens in modern yoga. He changed his teaching almost yearly. If you look at his 4 major students, they each teach completely different yoga. Different poses, different sequences, different philosophy. He himself claimed parts of his lineage came from visions and dreams. That's not how tradition works. That's how a brilliant individual works. What came out of his Mysore palace is genuinely innovative, and that's the right word. He invented a practice that shouldn't be called ancient. Some pieces of it are, most of it isn't. Yoga, of course, existed before all this. There were classical texts, there were lineages of Naga ascetics, tantric schools, devotional Vaishnava yoga, real things, living traditions in some cases. But here's what most people find surprising. In those classical texts, asana, what modern people call the postures, gets very little attention, maybe just a few sentences. They are not the center of practice. In reality, asana was very often just sitting, but also what comes to sequences, it was closer to Indian medicine. The pelvis, the palate, the breath, the prana system adjusted carefully with very specific intent, not gymnastics, not stretching, not fitness. In the 1800s and much more in 1900s, when this began to interface with British medicine and Western physical education, that meaning got lost. The outer shape pretty much survived, but the intent didn't. That's the break. Outer form preserved, inner purpose erased. If you want the academic version of all of this, you can read Mark Singleton's Yoga Body or Elliot Goldberg's Path of Modern Yoga. Both are real research by serious scholars. They reach the same conclusions I'm telling you. The difference is I spent my youth in India looking for real authentic traditional teachers. So here I'm sharing their perspective. Now, let's talk about the 1%. Traditional yoga in the strict sense has 3 criteria. First, and most importantly, a metaphysical understanding of what a human being is and what reality is. Not you are pure light or everything is one, but I'm talking about actual cosmology. Classical texts worked out over centuries, agreed with, refined, transmitted. The second is initiation, diksha. Years of training, not a weekend ceremony or a Yoga Alliance certificate. Third, parampara, living lineage, a teacher whose teacher had a teacher, whose teacher had a teacher, mouth to ear, for at least hundreds of years. Most modern yoga has none of these. The lineage I studied in, and I'm telling you this because the question always comes up, is the tantric line. That line is very similar to what people these days call Kashmir Shaivism. So, let's take a Shaiva text to set the stage. Paratrishika Vivarana, Abhinavagupta's commentary on a fragment of ancient Tantra. Thorough work that very few understand. It's an excellent example of how yogis see a human being and what's the point of all of this. In that text, the entire goal of yoga is summarized in 9 Sanskrit words. The goddess is speaking to Bhairava, who is Shiva in his fierce form, asking, how can a finite mind realize it's identical to infinite consciousness while remaining inside a human body? The rest of the text is Shiva's answer. So that's the question yoga was built to answer. I can guarantee Shiva's answer has nothing to do with flexibility or stress relief. The answer in the classical text is that yes, there is a method, there is a path, and it's been carried mouth to ear for thousands of years. There's actually a distinction in the tradition. B.K.S. Iyengar, who I just placed inside modern yoga, pointed it out. He said, most yoga students aren't yogis, they are bogis. Yoga means to unite. Boga means to enjoy. A bogi is someone who comes to yoga for benefits, flexibility, calm and cleaner mind, better sleep, and I'm not criticizing here. Those are real things. They are worth having. But a yogi is someone whose practice is aimed at something else entirely. At the question I just told you about. At becoming what they actually already are. Most modern yoga is boga. There's nothing wrong with that. Iyengar's point, and also mine, is don't confuse the two. Don't tell yourself you're doing yoga when you're doing boga. Practice is better when you can name what you are actually doing. Where are you aiming? The next obvious question is, what does the yogic path actually teach? What's inside the text I just mentioned? What does the Paratrishika Vivarana actually say about how a human realizes they were always Shiva while still in a body. So here's the teaching in a nutshell before I leave it. The path doesn't add anything to you. It doesn't take you somewhere new. It doesn't add muscles or make you more beautiful. The cosmos, according to yogic tradition, is sound, vibration of consciousness. And you are that sound noticing itself, currently in the form of a finite human. But it doesn't help knowing that. You have to recognize that. We are not creating a new state. Rather, we are recognizing what was always there, what is right now here. The body is the technology. Asana, pranayama, mantra, they're all actual instruments that let recognition become stable. The body is the temple, not the obstacle. It's a continuous noticing that gets more and more obvious until it can't be unnoticed. While you're walking, while you're in traffic, being the absolute fully, while in a body fully. So that's the headline. I'll be making a deeper video that walks through the actual path and the practice. So see you in the next one.